Let's be innovative. Let's challenge the norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M-Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The ButtKicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. There aren't many racing tracks around the world that have been able to keep the tides of time at bay, but nestled in Wisconsin is a true throwback track, an American national park of speed. And while it might be unforgiving and unrelenting, its old school nature still makes for the perfect racing ground for the modern era of race car. Welcome to Elkhart Lake, and welcome to the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Road America, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. Hello everyone and welcome along to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 ButtKicker Sports Car Series. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, delighted as always to be alongside Andrew Kinsella and getting ready to dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show. Boy, are we in for an electric one today, Andrew. You and I have commentated on many a race here, but with the multi-class nature of the race and of course the physical nature of the track, it is going to be a wild one where drivers will be hoping to stay alive as we take a look at our next level racing schedule.
Absolutely, Arjuna. It's physical, it's narrow, and most of all, it's fast, and it's almost complete opposite from 1 week's time, or 1 week ago at the Red Bull Ring. But looking at that schedule from Next Level Racing, got some really good races to look forward to as well. You got Silverstone in the month of September, flowing into Indianapolis and the Nürburgring, 3 really different tracks, again, that these drivers are going to have to master, and there's going to be a lot of European flair for the rest of this season as we go down towards Daytona.
Of course, parts of the season quite relentless. That 3-race spell coming up, of course, 2-week gaps between those races, but then longer gaps between others, of course, then almost 1 month between the penultimate and final round of our championship. We talk about the two classes in the LMDH standings. Here's a look at them presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. It is John Badefer that still leads the way, but the margin just 8 points back to Phil Kraus, then a further 3 back to Austin Young. Ultimately, the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team have 3 in contention, but a 4-car breakaway at the front, Andrew.
It really is. The top 4 have really started to separate themselves from the pack, as you can see. Of course, some of that is down to certain drivers not being able to make all of the races, but at the same time, you really have to, if you've watched week in, week out, you really have to say that John Badefer, Phil Kraus, Austin Young, and Graham Sanders have been the class of the field so far.
The thing for Phil Kraus, of course, though, is that he's going to be quite limited on preparation moving forward. He's going to be joining the session just after classes on a Monday night, and so it's going to be interesting for him how he will be able to flick the switch and immediately go racing. Here's a look at the GT3s. Once again, the standings presented by the BMW Performance Driving School, and this, of course, a class split into the pros and then the AMs. Sean Campbell has won all but 1 race, and that 1 race was the one that he has missed. 100% consistency, but now with the drop point starting to be factored in, the margin back to Ryan Otis and Joshua Chin still looking relatively favorable as they fight effectively for second in the championship. Chase Wilson has missed a couple of weeks and returns today with the points lead still intact. And of course, Andrew, we are so used to Wilson being up there and fighting up in the top 10, even the top 5 in the combined GT3 field.
Yeah, Chase Wilson has had a really strong season in that AM Championship, and it showed him being able to miss those couple of races and still come out with almost a 35-point lead on Trevor Malone there in second place. So really goes to show how well Chase has acquitted himself so far in this championship. I still maintain that we should have in-season promotions to the Pro Championship, but I guess we'll have to look at that for another season.
I mean, Trevor Malone would not complain, I do think. Let's take a look at the HyperX Team Championship. Of course, in the LMDHs, it's been all about Hydro Race Geodesic. Austin Young running by himself in that Hydro Race Geodesic outfit, and then the combination of Graham Sanders and John Badefer leading the way by now more than 140 points. Similar sort of story in the GT3 Championship, where not just Ryan Otis impressing for Synergy Motorsports, but Matthew Morhard as well. Not just backing up the speed, but also now consistently getting up even further up the field in qualifying. They have broken away even further in the team championship. Ultimately, though, Andrew, in a series that can be as wild as this with the multi-class affair, it's interesting to see how consistently those two teams have been able to perform.
Well, I think the key is just what you mentioned there, consistency in both the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing and the Synergy Motorsports. They have 2 incredibly consistent drivers who really like to get the car to the finish line, and that's really what it takes in an endurance championship like this, where you have the long 90-minute races. You can't afford to make mistakes, and having those nice, reliable drivers as a part of your stable really pays off.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the Gomez Sim Industry Series. Details in this very first year of the ButtKicker Sports Car Series, the 10th year of the Lionheart Racing Series. We're racing the ultimate driving machines, the BMW M Hybrid V8 and the BMW M4 GT3, both race-winning machines in the real and virtual world. They're all competing with a custom-fit setup built by the Majors Garage as they fight for their share of $18,000 in cash and prizes. Of course, the most notable of that, the LMDH and GT3 champions driving away in a BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School. All that through 90-minute timed races where live race control very much will come into play, as we have seen already multiple times over the course of the season. Arena track analysis as we make our way to America's National Park of Speed. We'll take a look at the track map from up above in just a few moments' time, but the one thing that never tells you is the elevation change that you experience here. Most notably, I think it's going to be on pit lane, where they have a 2-stage pit limiter in the real world to let drivers slow down in 2 phases. Not here in the sim. You've got to be as brave, as aggressive on that charge up the hill. We mentioned the fact that the track has retained its original layout, and that means that for what is a lengthy 4-mile facility, 18 laps for the GTPs, between 15 and 16 for the GT3s, who will all be looking to eke out as much mileage as they can because it's a lengthy trip down a slow pit lane. As we look from up above, Andrew, you and I have talked about how this track is deceptively simple at times.
Deceptively simple, but when you get down and start driving it, it's an incredibly hard track to master properly. You have to absolutely be committed on the brakes, you have to be committed on the throttle, and you have to be used to getting on the gas in sort of off-camber scenarios and really flowing the car corner to corner, and the whole lap is just 100% the entire time.
It's one of those laps where you have to commit lap after lap after lap, and with traffic, you're going to have to be wise as to when you send some of those desperation lunges. Before we go racing, it's time to thank all those that make this possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. ButtKicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com to learn more. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision-built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interactions between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. From simple logos to full branding for your companies, virtual designs, deliveries raced by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com to learn more. Drivers out there on track right now for qualifying. 5 minutes left. Only a handful of laps, though, still left to be complete. The drivers only get 4 flying laps with which to work their way around the track. Currently on top in the LMDH is John Baderfer in the Hydra Ace Geodesic machine. Interesting to note, Sean Campbell on the 3rd lap so far, yet to punch in a time.
Yeah, but look at the gap at the top of the LMDH field there, Arjuna. John Baderfer is 1/10 over Graham Sanders, but it's only 2 tenths back to Flynn Lazier in 4th place. So we got a really tight race on our hands.
There is going to be, I think, plenty of draft with which we'll see the drivers working with as well. The climb up the hill where we will also start the race means for bit of an interesting starting zone. Baderfer to the line, no improvement, but Phil Kraus goes top.
What a lap there from Phil Kraus. He just went top, and Austin Young has replied as well. So we've got now a 5-car fight for the pole position here. Adam Blocker was going fast as well. What did he come up with?
Not sure. Timing there not necessarily giving us the most accurate representation. I will just note that there is still a lap to come potentially from Phil Kraus, because he had just completed the 2nd of his 4 laps. Might still have an opportunity. There's the inevitable. Ryan Otis runs his way through the carousel as Sean Campbell by 2 tenths jumps to the top.
See, he was just leaving it a little bit later in the session to create a little drama here, Arjuna.
Just a little bit, wasn't he? Down the hill and now working through what is technically turn 3 and spooling his way for what will be his final run in the qualifying session. Handful of drivers still trying to find some improvement. Lionel Kalisto will be the next to come. You can see on the right side there's that pit entry. It's definitely going to be something that we will be talking about over the course of the day. That for Kalisto seems like he's going to find about 1/10 of a second in improvement. That will keep him inside of the top 6. Miguel Vigo jumps in front of Ryan Otis, though. Otis has no time still left to respond.
It was a nice lap there from Miguel Vigo to pull that out, but Matthew Morhart is crossing the finish line. Doesn't look very fast this lap, so he's going to stay right where he is in 4th place. But yeah, it's really tight at the top of the GT3 field. You mentioned Campbell leaving it late, but he's only 2/10 up over 3rd place. That's not a lot around a track like this.
Couldn't really give too much margin. I think for Morhart, that was the setup lap. Has one more lap still to try and close the 2/10 margin up to his teammate in front. Matt Taylor finds a huge bunch of time. His first representative lap, jumps in front of his teammate Michael O'Brien. It's only going to be 9th position though, right there. In the final 3 minutes of the session, there are still a couple of drivers that can find some improvement. Carlos Villa in the second of the Hydro Race Geodesic GT3s finds a good 5/10 or so. Slots himself up into 5th. We jump on board with Phil Kraus though as he spools the hybrid up and dives down out of turn 3.
And Phil Kraus is, despite the fact that he is P1 right now, he's still on at Arjuna. He is really pushing the car, and you saw how much you have to take all of the track that's available, because if you get even a little bit offline in most of these corners, there's not a mountain of runoff like there was in the Red Bull Ring. There's dirt and grass on the outside, isn't there?
Definitely, and I think the thing for Kraus is, like I mentioned, with the limited preparation the day of the races, these qualifying laps in some ways are his practice laps. So we'll see how he goes on the long run speed, but of course Phil Kraus from Wisconsin himself originally, so expecting the hometown driver to be plenty strong. This is one of the places where we expect traffic to be its most dangerous, through the kink, which is barely a lift of a throttle for the GTP machines. It's very committed for GT3 as well, and there is a sizable speed difference.
Yes, there is, but fortunately we do have a lot of straight lines on this track where the GTPs can get around the GT3s, so hopefully traffic won't be as big a factor today as it maybe has been at some other tracks, but I definitely think that it is going to cause a little bit of havoc when you get into the braking zones.
Matthew Morhart jumps in front of Ryan Otis, and so the 62 has out-qualified the 95. Phil Kraus does not find any improvement, but I mean, we're starting on top anyway. Any improvement in time would have just been marginal at best. Jimbo Pfeiffer's still out there, but these are practice laps. All the official qualifying laps are in the books, and as we take a look at the track, with the drivers getting a final couple of moments before we go racing, weather conditions pretty warm, Andrew, but they're going to cool on down from here as we run our way into the evening on iRacing Day.
Yeah, a little bit of a later start today in Wisconsin, and you can see that the track temperature maybe isn't as hot as it could be with the 27-degree air temperature, so definitely we should see that fall. I would guess probably all the way down to maybe 39, even 38 degrees Celsius, and every degree will make a difference for these drivers in these cars. We're definitely hearing that with the long straightaways, tire wear will be a factor, certainly for the LMDHs.
We, of course, expect the 2 pit stops in this 90-minute affair. We have the slightly capped fuel capacity that forces the drivers to have to come down on towards the pit lane. They'll get themselves ready to go for what is going to be a helter-skelter round in this ButtKicker Sports Car Series. Ready to go at America's National Park of Speed. Let's take you down through today's ButtKicker starting grid. And so Phil Kraus puts it on pole. The Wisconsin native will bring us to the green alongside Austin Young, as the championship hopefuls will keep themselves up towards the very front. Look at those margins though, just 1.3 tenths back to John Baderfer, while Graham Sanders will make it 3 of the black and gold contingent inside the front 2 rows. Adam Blocker and then Flynn Lazier find themselves inside of 0.3 of a second around a 4-mile facility. It's going to be a knife fight, that is for sure. Alexander Van der Sette and Michael O'Brien, row number 4 as the margins start to increase. Alex Guyon, Matt Taylor, the final cars inside the top 10, with David Sewell, the 1 car missing out. That's the BMW M Hybrid V8s, and now the BMW M4 GT3 grid will line up as such. Sean Campbell once again maintains the 100% pole streak for him. It's Miguel Vigo just 1/10 off. Will be looking to stay in that draft and make the 26's life as difficult as possible. It's Synergy Motorsports on row 2, but with more heart in front of Otis, Villa alongside with Callisto on the third row of the grid. It's Brian Bennett and then Andrew Marquez that will make up the rest of the pros. Before we dive into the AMs, Chase Wilson on his return of, again, pole position in class, but alongside with Jim Herrick will be looking to push that number 13. Travis Yeager, Trevor Malone share row 6, while hopefully not unlucky 13th for Chris Reagan in the number 19 machine. Jimbo Pfeiffer, Creighton Carter, and then Dean Mole make up the top 16 in class with Craig Forsyth, Drew White, as we dive into those cars with no times on the board. We've got a full formation lap to work our way through, so plenty of time to talk you through some of the expected comings and goings of today's 90-minute affair as they begin to pull their way away for a full pace lap of running. Let's take the time to run you down through today's featured on-board cameras, and we'll start in the GTP machines that roll away now behind that safety car. Starting with the number 11 of Austin Young, the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing driver rides with Gomez Sim Industries, makers of high-end esports equipment and controls. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Might have some drama in class because we were expecting to get a look on board with Flynn Lazier, but he disconnected from the starting grid, and he will be looking to rejoin come the first couple of laps of the race. Sean Campbell rides with ButtKicker. Sim racing is better with ButtKicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. And also in this GT3 class, second in the championship, Ryan Otis carries with him the BMW Performance Driving School. Drive on the edge of physics and experience the ultimate rush. Visit BMWPerformanceDrivingCenter.com. Great thing about sim racing, we get to look on board with every single one of the 29 machines that will roll, but as mentioned, Andrew, already drama, as Flynn Lazier will be looking to start from the pit lane and hoping not to go 1 or 2 laps down.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't afford to go even 1 lap down at a track as big as Road America, but the good news for Flynn Lazier is that he does have a very long pace lap here to get back into the sim and get back into his car, so hopefully he can get connected to the service once again very quickly here. And he's not the only one. Obviously, we do have some weather in various parts of the United States that could be affecting some of these drivers.
That is always a concern. Happened in one of the World Championship qualifying series to one of the red line drivers, so it's definitely something to give a think to. I think Drew White might also be joining Flynn Lazier from watching on from the sidelines, at least initially. We talked briefly about the warm track conditions, and as Phil Kraus tries to get as close to the safety car as possible, just a reminder that it's not like they've cooled down that much initially on the start. It's at the end of the race, Andrew, where we expect maybe the tires to have a little bit more freedom, a bit more life come the end of the race, and therefore the first 2 stints going to be crucial to manage the rubber underneath.
Absolutely. It'll all be about taking what they can get for the first couple of stints, and then, as you say, as we approach 5 o'clock in sim time, definitely the temperatures are going to start to drop, and the times are going to start to drop right along with them.
Don't forget that we have a starting zone, and the safety car pulls away. The field's left in control, yes, of Phil Kraus, but not to clear away and run away at the front. Instead, to wait to take control once we get into that starting zone. Expectations then, Andrew. I think we know it's always going to be an interesting one here, and interesting for Chris Reagan, who's now stuck in the kitty litter.
Looks like there might have been a hardware failure for Chris Reagan, and he had to pull off into that sand in order to make sure that no one got into him. But yeah, as you say, it's going to be an interesting start to this race. Obviously, turn 1 is always very treacherous in any race, but here it's a little bit faster than normal, but it's a very narrow turn 1, so it's very difficult for these drivers who want to go in there 2 and 3 wide to actually get through there unscathed. So definitely something to watch for. And then, of course, turn 5, the big braking zone at the end of the second straightaway here. That's always an action zone on lap 1.
And it's a climb up the hill before we go racing. Prediction time, Andrew. Who comes out on top in the GTPs?
I can't go against Graham Sanders right now.
Well, I don't think that's a bad bet, but with the field that close in qualifying, it really could be anyone's win here. We climb the hill as we get ready to rumble. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart underway for the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Road America, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. Great jump from Phil Kraus, and now the Hydra Race geodesic contingent have got to get it figured out amongst themselves. Big send from Young, but now maybe too wide. In through the gravel and trying to hold on to the machine. Safely back onto the track, but dropping behind Adam Blocker. That's the kind of drama we expect as the GT3s begin to rumble as well on their climb into turn number 1.
Oh, it's so tempting to try and take all you can in that first corner. It came back and bit Austin Young right there. Let's see if the GT3s can get through turn 1 just a little bit cleaner than Austin Young did. Looks like so far so good for your GT3 field.
Austin Young's all the way down outside of the top 5 now. Graham Sanders has gotten past Blocker down in through turn number 5. Bit of drama in the very back of the shot. Dean Moll slides through the grass but hangs on to the M4 GT3. Great car control. And as the GTPs hurry down through the hurry downs, they work their way into the middle sector of the lap. Phil Kraus almost 9/10 clear at the front.
A really good start there from Phil Kraus and John Badefer as well. They have left Graham Sanders in the dust here, almost 2.5 seconds back from Phil Kraus to Graham Sanders already. It's the top 2 just walking away right now, and the rest of these prototypes really have to sort of gather themselves up and get back up there in a hurry.
The first cycle of traffic is always the most frenetic. It's the one where maybe the field can be the most split, and therefore it's a relatively good sign, you'd have to say, for those out there and running. Flynn Lazier, by the way, has just reconnected to the session and is going to head out there on track, but unfortunately will be scored as 1 lap down. End of that opening lap. The breakaway indeed sees the draft dropping away at the front of the LMDH field. Great to see, though. Sean Campbell's going to feel the pressure. Miguel Vigo still very much in hunting distance.
Yeah, definitely Miguel Vigo's done his job here on this opening lap, and that is staying in contact with Sean Campbell. If he can stay in contact with him through these first couple of laps, I really do think that he stands a good shot at being able to stay in contact with him over the long run here. So definitely a good sign for the potential for some fighting in this GT3 field over the course of this race.
And as we look at the track map, let's not forget that not only is this a long facility with the lap times even for the prototypes being in the 142nd bracket, but the nature of the split class start still means that we're going to have at least a good 10 or so minutes before the first pass of traffic occurs. And so for these GT3 cars, even though there will be a smidge of fuel saving, I'm sure, going through their mind in terms of a thought, not necessarily sure how much they are going to dive and commit on that, at least this early in the race. I must say, as much as we were thinking that the draft might be broken between the top 3, at least the top 2 and that third car running on back, I got to say, Graham Sanders doing all he can to latch back onto the draft up front. And if you're Blocker and Van der Sant behind, the one thing you cannot do now is start to fight and make yourselves lose a little bit more time.
Absolutely, and I would extend that as well to O'Brien and Young as well, and keep in mind that Young is really going to want to come through this field, so he can't afford to get sort of into a battle with Michael O'Brien and Alexander Van der Sant too much. He's got to find a way to get these passes done quickly and cleanly, so definitely going to be interesting to watch these first couple of laps here, just to see how this all sort of settles down. But Sanders right now, I think, is the fastest driver on track.
Have not seen any moves on that past lap, but I think it's just about to change as we work up into turn 1. Austin Young on the bounce back, slides up the inside of Michael O'Brien, and tidy, easy, not really a fight put up there. Position swapped around, and down the hill, Young sets his sights on Van der Sant inside of the top 5. Here's what happened to Chris Reagan, by the way, and I think you're right, Andrew, in your diagnosis. Probably some sort of hardware failure, avoiding action, and fortunately staying out of the wall.
Yeah, he was fortunate. I suspect it was probably something along the lines of a VR failure, if I'm diagnosing that right, because he is back out on track now. So I think he just needed to get his VR headset reset, and he was able to rejoin. So narrow miss there for Chris Reagan, and he's doing well in 12th place in your GT3 field right now. Yeah,
actually, that is remarkable. Surely was able to get back to a reasonable starting spot on the start. Speaking of the start, that's what happened to Austin Young, and Was there a brief technical moment that saw him run a bit wide? Sometimes when you see a car disappear, it does not just mean there was an internet issue. There could have been something else going on.
There could have been, but he was, before he even got to the blinking stage, he had already overcommitted to that corner, Arjuna. So I think, to be honest, it was just a little bit of a mistake on cold tires. And it's so easy to do on the start. You really want to gain as much as you possibly can around the outside on that first corner, because you can hang it out there. But when you have such cold tires as you do at the start, just a couple of miles an hour too much and suddenly you're off in the kitty litter.
Let's not forget they all have a fixed setup. There's no difference in downforce that's going to give them some more speed. It's just the draft that's being fed and the hole in the air and the advantage they take. Inside for Young as he tries to work back up into the top 5. Another easy move. Van der Santen recognizing the 2-second buffer already built up to Blocker, maybe showing the relative lack of speed compared to the very top level. Half a second off in the qualifying session as well. See how it fares out for the number 96 and trying to keep track of those in front and hold off those behind as well. Not just Austin Young that had a off-track moment in the early stages of the race. Dean Moll was another one. Here's a look back in the pack, and not necessarily sure I could figure out if there was contact or if that was just the rear end stepping out.
Yeah, I think it was just a little bit of rear wheel spin. If you watch, he gets sort of right near that curb on the inside, and there is a little bit of a lip to it if you catch it. And I think it was just a combination of the curb and a little bit too much power down for Dean Moll there.
Well, able to hold on. Unfortunately, seems like for Flynn Lazier, by the way, he is one lap down, able to head back out there onto track. It'll be very interesting to see how he would have been able to run. Has definitely been one of the more aggressive drivers in traffic, and sometimes at a track like this that plays out in your favor. He does carry HyperX over his shoulder, whatever you play, however you play. HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. And for Flynn Lazier, he's running behind one of the other GTP machines, at least has some company for this next phase of the race. Your eyes don't deceive you, by the way. Sean Campbell, yes, is in the lead, Andrew, but hasn't broken away with almost 8 minutes burn. Matthew Morehart's holding on quite well. Ryan Otis is the Synergy Motorsports driver that's losing ground.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a reversal of fortunes for the two Synergy drivers, with Morehart being sort of the rabbit in this race. We haven't really seen that from him all season, but he really did take a step up, sort of right from Mosport and Monza all the way up to the Red Bull Ring. And now he's taken a further step forward on his teammates. So it's really good to see that Morehart is really starting to mount a proper challenge here for this GT3 field.
Also shows as well that even at the very top level of sim racing, from track to track, we talked early about the different challenges that these drivers are having to contend with. Different drivers have different preferences. I love a bit of Road America. It was decently quick here, but you put me at somewhere like Barber, as much fun as I have there, it's not one of those tracks that I never necessarily ever figured out the flow of properly, and always a bit of a challenge for me. Challenging as well, I think, is going to be this first cycle through on traffic. John Baderford held pretty close with Phil Krause. Graham Sanders is close within 4 more tenths, so within 1.2 seconds on the back of his teammate. You can see how close the traffic is. Next lap by, we'll start to experience the GT3s.
Yeah, you say next lap by. I would say by the start-finish line they'll start encountering these GT3s. So it's definitely going to start getting a little bit interesting, and we'll have to see how they negotiate the GT3s, the slower cars, because we do have these very, very long straightaways, yes, but there are certain portions of this track that it will be difficult to pass on, particularly after about turn 6, after the Corvette Bridge, in through the hurry downs and all the way around the carousel. Be very interesting to see which prototypes are willing to sort of hang it out, maybe on the outside of the carousel or something, to try and get around these GT3s.
I think it is also going to be a bit of an important factor when you get an opportunity to pick off one car at a time, take advantage of it, because right now it's easy going. Once you get into the heart of the traffic, it's a slightly different situation. Matt Taylor, by the way, had a bit of a off-track moment down at Canada Corner. He finds himself running now in 10th position, last of the lead lap LMDHs. There is the heart of the traffic, and it's right where, Andrew, you said you don't necessarily want to catch it, and now this is where potentially you're going to have to take chances. Phil Kraus very loose and almost into the side of one of the GT3s.
And you can see Phil Kraus having to lift there and down through the hurry downs, and then this is going to be the interesting part, is how brave do you want to be around this carousel? There's a lineup of 4 GT3 cars, and look at Phil Kraus go to the outside here, but I don't think he's going to go. Oh, he does go out onto the outside of all of them.
And they're going to go around the outside of all of them. That's brave, knowing the GT3s wash out with the understeer nature that these heavier GT3 cars tend to have. One of the GT3s, I think, got forced wide into the grass. Travis Jägerlehner held on. The first cycle through as relentless as we would expect. Top 2 have stretched their legs. Adam Blocker now under fire from Austin Young.
Blocker definitely had to negotiate the car of Jägerlehner as he rejoined there, and it allowed Austin Young to really catch back up to the back of Adam Blocker. I think overall, though, I'm surprised at how cleanly all of the LMDHs were able to negotiate that, because there could have been a lot more calamity there.
Oh, we're not done just yet, but I think the good thing is that we have dispatched of enough of the initial GT3s that by the time we head off into turn 5, your leaders should have got through the majority of the field. And we'll see if Matthew Morhart's going to take advantage of this, by the way, to bridge the gap up to the top 2 who have been able to break the draft. Jimbo Pfeiffer is headed down to the pit lane, but everyone else who started is still out there and running for the time being. Graham Sanders, through all of that, has closed the gap to the top 2 by another 2 tenths and left Adam Blocker just slightly out of drafting range.
But look at the bravery on the brakes from these prototype cars, Arjuna. You really have to be committed on the brakes in these cars, because the GT3s, to be fair to them, the one area that they're pretty good at compared to the prototypes is under braking. So you really have to be fully committed if you're going to make a move like that.
You do, and you heard on board with Kraus the hesitancy riding behind Vigo through that right-hand kink, not wanting to wash out too wide and run into the side. We are officially through, at least for your now top 3 contenders, the GT3 traffic. See how it fares for the rest of the cars, but seems to have played out relatively calmly, all things considered. With maybe the exception of this one moment, the 17 of Jägerlehner just gets spooked by the late dive to the inside, fortunately able to hold on.
Yeah, definitely could have been a lot worse for Jägerlehner. That's a really difficult place to gather the car up, and he did an admirable job of it. Yeah, the problem was that I think that was Sanders that was coming through there. He basically came right when Jägerlehner would have been diving towards the apex, so he had to open up the steering again, and then at that speed, you basically are. Yeah, go ahead.
Here we go, half a shape to the inside for Baedefer, and now that we're through the traffic for the first time, they're going to be a bit of a tussle for the lead, because now you've got probably, another 10 minutes of clean air, Andrew, before we'll cycle through that traffic once again.
This is definitely the time to do it if you're John Baedefer. There'll be no help for Phil Kraus in terms of the draft, so all you need to do is get a really good run here and potentially chuck it down the inside into 5. And
not even, once again, a defense offered. It's as easy as you'd like. So many of these drivers just more concerned about thinking the long game, even if in a 90-minute timed race. And John Baedefer hits the front. Phil Kraus slides the second. Graham Sanders has fallen a couple tenths further back, and once again has got to try and claw back up to those in front. This is kind of what we expected, though, a drag-out fight, Andrew. It's not going to be one on one lap. It's going to be one over the 90 minutes.
Yeah, you're going to have to nail everything, both in terms of pace and in terms of strategy, if you're going to come out on top of this LMDH field, because you can see just on screen there, the top 5 within 3.5 seconds of each other, already 15 minutes into this race. So you know that if they're that close together right now, they're going to be that close together for a very long time here.
That's Jim Herrick. That's run off the track, has dropped down to 14th after starting a second in class inside of the top 10. It's just under that bridge before you get to turn 6 where the issue has been had. Miguel Vigo's had an issue with the GTP traffic, and now the margin up to Sean Campbell above 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an interesting incident. I think we're going to have to get a replay of that, but it looked like something very similar to what happened with with the Jägerliner, and this is on the replay here with Herrick. Again, he just didn't turn in there. I think he got spooked by the GT3 car on his inside there and didn't turn in and went straight, and then very, very similar. Oh, they might have made contact there, Arjuna.
They definitely made contact. The question I have is for Miguel Vigo, did he slightly misjudge? So I think he expected Guyon to go through a little bit quicker, but Guyon in the prototype with the tighter entry, I don't think had much choice but to potentially lift off the throttle. Just watch the sequence and we'll ride on board with the prototype.
Yeah, you have to be so committed here. And then, yeah, Guyon definitely had a big lift there. I think that it was just a little bit of miscommunication. Guyon, I'm going to disagree with you. I think Guyon could have stayed in the gas a little bit more.
No. I agree with you, to be clear. I think he thought he had to get out of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think the best thing for him would have just been to be a little bit more committed and allow Vigo to sort of cut in behind him there.
And that's why we highlighted that as one of the problem spots, just because of the level of committedness that you need. And when things go wrong through there, they usually end quite badly. We've gotten away with quite a bit. And yes, I will... Maybe I needed to rephrase myself. Guyon thought he needed to lift, but that downforce is generated the more speed you have. So more speed equals more grip. It's counterintuitive.
It is. You really have to drive these cars to understand just how committed you have to be, and how much of a difference carrying your speed really does make, because that's often one of the things that sort of separates the top drivers from the other drivers, is you almost have to take a leap of faith and a step in commitment in order to get up to the level of say a John Bettifor or a Phil Kraus in this car.
It's why I truly have a lot of respect for anyone who has maybe not done too much open wheel downforce racing before and then jumps into one of these machines. Even these prototypes are downforce machines, and figures out how to get the most out of it. It is definitely a different sort of a challenge, and so many GT drivers are making that transition as well in the real world, of course, with manufacturers diving into this new era of prototype racing, the likes of the Lawrence Vanthoor and so many more. So it'll be curious to see how they all get on. Bit of a difference between the front of both of our classes, you'd say. Now that Miguel Vigo's had that slight moment, has dropped off about 3 seconds to your class leader, Sean Campbell. Campbell once again content at the front, and even though Bettifor is extending the margin, you know that as we get ready for another pass through of traffic, that top 5 could compress itself up very easily.
Yes, and of course the problem for Vigo in the GT3 field is he's lost the draft of Sean Campbell, so any little difference in speed can't be overcome by the draft now, so Campbell is just sort of eking out by a second or two. But we got a real good battle on our hands for 4th place. Adam Blocker has been having some very defensive lines over the last couple of laps to keep Austin Young behind him. And
you can tell the pressure that is being built here. Adam Blocker's internet issues notwithstanding, the lines being run by the Powerslide Motorsports number 74 as wide as you can get here, using every inch, every pixel that he can find out there across the line. With now 10 laps complete, means we are more than halfway through the fuel run. And you mentioned it earlier, Andrew, the long straights in conjunction with the warm temperatures mean that it's a double dose of pain for the tires.
Yeah, the long straights in particular really do have an effect on these tires and the tire model on iRacing. It really is conducive to building up the temperature at these really high speed points, and then of course you have to jump on the brakes as hard as you possibly can. It's really, really difficult on the tires.
It's also interesting, right, that you're not just braking for the sake of slowing down in these cars, you're braking for the sake of trying to get energy back into the hybrid unit, and so you're not necessarily always going 100% braking potential. You're sometimes trying to go to the point where you get maximum regen and maybe extend the braking phase, yes, but get a bit more hybrid power that you can chuck out of the corner, and maybe especially through traffic. That's a nice little thing to have. Alex Guyon has had some issues and finds himself now in pit lane, joins Jimbo Pfeiffer there. Let's see what happened to the Raven Lavoie Motorsports car. It comes out of turn 8. Was there contact there with Matt Taylor?
There might have been just a hint of it. It would have been very difficult for Matt Taylor to avoid Guyon in that scenario, because basically as soon as he got on the thing there, no, Matt Taylor, it looks like he got away with it.
I think he did, you know?
Like, there was not more than 2 or 3 inches between the cars, but I think he got away with it.
Yeah, the reason I brought up the potential contact is, other than that, I don't see why Guyon would have come down to pit lane, but maybe the iRacing gods not smiling down on him. Fortunate for Taylor, though, that's still out there and running, albeit the last of the cars on the lead lap right now. Flynn Lazier's taken advantage of that slip up from Guyon to scramble up in towards the top 10. Kraus is really having issues, by the way. We're looking at Young and Blocker, but equally Sanders and Kraus starting to get increasingly close together, all as we get closer and closer to traffic as well.
And you were mentioning with Kraus off the top where he hasn't had much practice in this car. And one of the things where that comes into play is look at Kraus dancing there. I think that he's run the tires off this car with how hard he was pushing it. And you really have to have a delicate balance in terms of speed and longevity of the tires. And once the tires start going over the cliff, you basically can't get them back on a track like this.
The benefit, though, is that with the race being 90 minutes and expecting 2 pit stops, no matter what is done, we have traditionally seen that the cars are able to go beyond the top of the hour, like this is a 2-hour race and we have 1 hour pit stop at 1 hour, like the BMW Emerson Cup, but beyond the 30-minute mark, and so it means you have maybe the potential to split the race equally into the 3 different stints, and maybe Kraus will be diving down to the pit lane a bit early to get some tires, if that is indeed causing him some strife. Coming to the end of the 12th lap, second dance through traffic going to begin occurring. Kraus swoops up and under, but now checks up off the corner. Here comes the charge of the 100.
Yeah, we've got a move for second coming. Phil Kraus is going very defensive here, and of course he's also trying to negotiate these GT3s. Look at Graham Sanders underneath the back wing there, but we got a move from Austin Young around the outside potentially, but Blocker holds on.
Oh, and that's Craig Forsyth, I believe. That's gotten mixed up, or maybe Dean Moll, one of the two. Big drama there. Austin Young, the main loser in the LMDHs there. Dean Moll, I can confirm, is headed back to the pit lane. I was about to say, I don't know if for Austin Young it was the wisest to look around the outside with a GT3 just off the exit of the corner, but it ended up being a moot point.
Yeah, it was going to be an inopportune time for Austin Young to try that move at the best of times, and then that was just a flat-out mistake there from Dean Moll, and very nearly took out 2 of our prototype contenders here. I think both of them got very, very lucky here. I don't see very much damage on either of them.
Let's see if we can take a look on board with Young in that 11. Long way around. Like I say, you can already just see that you're likely to have to cut back underneath, but it's the couple of inches of tires in the gravel that caused the issue there. I think Young gets away without causing any more contact, but one more look at it, and from Blocker's perspective, is there going to be any damage to the underside of the car where the downforce comes from? Because that was an aggressive check into the wall.
Yeah, it's either going to be some downforce potentially lost on the 74, or maybe even some slight suspension damage. We'd have to look at his steering wheel maybe to get a good sense of that, but it definitely seems like potentially Blocker would have come out the worst for the wear. Young there did an amazing job of getting the car woed down and staying off of Dean Moll for the most part, at least.
So back up across the line. Blocker's wheel, at least from the perspective that we get, looks relatively straight as we lead off some speed in through that opening right-hander, but a big drama, that is for sure. Austin Young still out there, right behind, and now we'll have to try and assess the next opportunity to slide on through. The 2 Synergy Motorsports teammates, by the way, have found each other. Matthew Morhart has lost about 2 seconds to Miguel Vigo. Ryan Otis maybe slightly better on tires, made up some ground on his Synergy Motorsports counterpart.
Ryan Otis famously very, very good at saving his tires for the last bit of the run, and looks like today's no exception here. He's allowed his teammate Matthew Morhart to sort of be the rabbit to his tortoise, and now he is trying to come out on the other side with the lead, at least among the teammates.
Might see a potential overcut coming if Otis is just saving a bit of fuel and can also run the tires that little bit longer. Around the outside goes one of those gold machines, the Raven Lavoie Motorsports entries. Cycling through the kink. Alex Guyon is back on track, I can tell you, by the way, so no retirement inside the LMDHs just yet. The retirements have taken place just in the GT3 so far. Chase Wilson on return to the series. Running well, running as the lead am, as you'd expect, but running up in 7th. It's another day where, because, let's not forget, Andrew, the AMs score point at the same classification. They are scored alongside with the pros in each race, but in the championship classified separately. So for Chase Wilson, who's been consistently able to get up into that top 7, it's going to be another great points day for him.
Yes, and he's just gotten around Lionel Callisto there, who's also having a really strong day so far today. He was in 7th, now down to 8th position in the Synergy Motorsports Blue machine. But yeah, Chase Wilson, he's just sort of picked up where he's left off. He's not quite got the speed of the top drivers in the GT3 Pro field, but he's definitely nailing the consistency so far in this race.
Yeah, it's also now going to be about the strategy, the tires, and how he will sort through all of that before the summer break that he has taken. There were a couple of I don't want to say inconsistent rounds, because that implies that he was inconsistent. It was just getting mixed up in some big drama and not being allowed to show his full potential. That is the better way to put it. And so we'll see if a challenge to the top 5 combined comes today. 3 minutes from the top of the hour and 3 laps away at the line from seeing the GTPs into pit lane. I think the question will be, Andrew, with the full pace lap that we had, is that going to mean 1 less lap at the start of this first stint of the race?
It could potentially, particularly where I don't really think that we're going to be too close on the fuel window. I believe the GTPs can get all the way up to lap 18, so if you see them on lap 17, that'll still put them down probably with 58 minutes to go. So I definitely think that some short fills could be in order here.
Remember, 35-second pit delta, not including the actual stop time itself. It's not a short trip to the lane by any means. Flynn Lazier's off on pit lane. I think Michael O'Brien might be joining him as well. Left side's in the grass through the carousel. And I don't know how that did not end worse. Now, I see Austin Young and Adam Blocker slow on the timing. Young's out of the gravel. Blocker's picking himself up as well. What's gone on into the opening corner?
Yeah, that looks like something happened down into turn 1 there, and I think we're going to have to get a replay of this because it looks like they might have finally come to blows here.
And so let's take a look at it. Running up into turn number 1. Is there going to be a bit of a desperation move? Well, he was alongside. Not sure. Might need to look from above. Blockers in the tires, but slightly. I think we'll get away with that one. Hopefully no more damage for Young except to the ego. There isn't much of an overlap, is there?
There really isn't. Austin Young, that was an overly optimistic move, if I'm going to be honest there. Blocker was really late on the brakes. I think, in my opinion, that it was Blocker's corner at that point. Yes, there was a little overlap, but it was contact square on the Blocker's rear wheel there, so I think Austin Young just had to lift there, and he didn't.
Well, it's not the first, not the second, but I think the third different thing that Austin Young has been involved in today, unfortunately. Led the championship for a couple of rounds at the start. Now only sits 11 points off of Betafer, but the points leader continues to run at the very front of this field and just stretching the margin further and further. We are on to the 17th lap of the race. If you didn't save a bit of fuel on our full formation lap, we expect you potentially to come in at the end of this lap. But like Andrew mentioned, it gets you past the top of the hour, gets you relatively comfortable in the fuel numbers. For the GT3s, they are also about 2 laps away from the pit window, 1 lap away this time at the line, and Sean Campbell's built the margin up to 4.3 seconds since breaking that draft.
Yeah, it's just been a slow sort of slowly increasing the gap for Sean Campbell. It's been a 10th a lap here, 10th a lap there. He hasn't been dominating like we've seen him in other races. It's just, again, been that slow build up. But one thing I do want to say is that Matthew Morehart has sort of stopped the bleeding to Miguel Vigo very nicely here. And he's sort of stabilized the gap, even to Sean Campbell as well. So the demise of Matthew Morehart in terms of his tires might have been a little bit premature here.
Or maybe just getting the help from the teammate, the visual help, right? Once you've got someone in your rearview mirrors, it can either put more pressure onto you or give you a bit of a kick to get a move on. There's Baderfer, has cycled through some traffic on this lap. And question will become now, with the 30 minutes complete, will we see them jink off to the pit lane in a tricky pit entry? How committed are these drivers going to be, knowing that seconds can be made up just by being as perfect as you can be and finding your braking spot and climbing that hill and running to the lane? Baderfer's going to stay out for one more lap. Kraus and Sanders will do as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe Austin Young or Adam Blocker might come in this time by just to get the damage assessed and maybe fresh tires after so much so many extracurricular activities. So far though, Young does stay out. Oh, Van de Sant down pit road this time by though.
So that becomes at least one driver. It's the Powerslide Motorsports 96 that pops its head from above the wall, and now a lengthy trip down pit lane. And the other thing is it rises, and if you find yourself short on fuel and spluttering, well, if you're at the very end of pit lane, tough.
Yeah, and the other thing about the pit lane speed here, 45 miles an hour, which when you are going close to 200 miles an hour down that front straightaway, it is so slow, Arjuna.
I think it is, by the way, very, very painfully slow. I think we do have Sean Campbell down on pit lane, and I believe we are going to get the rest of the field to follow. Vigo, Morehart, Otis, Carlos Villa coming as well. Don't think the GT3s are going to get beyond that 15th lap of racing. Impressive that for the LMDHs that they all have been able to go that additional lap, and for the most part it's going to mean clean air for the prototypes breaking into pit entry.
Yeah, I think this was a really good set of fortune for the prototypes, at least in terms of where this pit cycle has happened, because definitely having that clean pit entry for the prototypes is going to be so important, because they do have just better performance in the pit lane. And as you say, it's not just a tenth or two, it can be up to a second or two that you can gain or lose on this pit entry with how tricky it is.
Those cones are very deep into the lane as well. That is the other thing, as that is Phil Kraus, who was definitely above the 45 miles an hour at the cones, but gets away with it based on the laws of averages. Andrew Marquez, Travis Yeagerlano, two drivers in the GT3s that were able to go one lap longer. But I think in the prototypes, it's going to be the field that comes on in at the end of lap number 18. They will hit their marks, hopefully not sliding through their boxes. I think our expectation is to go up on the jacks and get some fresh tires.
Yeah, everyone I think is going to be having these fresh tires here, Arjun. I don't think anyone's gonna want to stay on the old boots at any point today, just because of the incredible tire wear that we've seen over the course of this race so far. But yeah, definitely this is one of the tracks where we talk about fuel strategy a lot. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of fuel strategy here today. It's
a long track, hard to have fuel strategy when you need to save that additional amount of fuel to be able to go a lap. We are waiting to see the times. There's Baderfer. It's a 33.3 second stop. Now Phil Kraus didn't get dinged for speeding, but that is a 6 second longer pit stop than the HydroRace Geodesic Racing pair that now run 1 and 2, and not just looking good in the HyperX Team Championship, but our points leader in class also runs at the very front of the field. Bit of a split strategy, and the same story in the GT3s. Yes, Sean Campbell is still leading there. Miguel Vigo's got company in the mirrors. Matthew Morehart and Ryan Otis have taken 3 seconds shorter in the pit lane. They'll flip around in the second pit stop sequence, but Miguel Vigo's got to deal with the pressure until then.
And they've also got to negotiate some GTP traffic as well. But definitely Matthew Morehart's looking in a very good position here. If he can stay on the back of Miguel Vigo for this stint, he can potentially draft up, and then on this next stint really, or on the final stint, really take it to Miguel Vigo. So I think there's still a lot to play for in this GT3 class, particularly for second, third, and fourth.
I think Ryan Oda is the big winner in that sequence, really, though, because with the almost 1 second longer pit stop that he had compared to Matthew Morhart, might have a bit more fuel in the tank for this next cycle, and we'll see how it plays out. Andrew Marquez emerges in 7th spot, so the long run has gotten the 63 in front of Chase Wilson and Lionel Kalisto. You can make passes on strategy as well. It's just a bit of a reminder of that. Now, once again, settle into a rhythm. Hope that you can find a bit of pocket of clean air with which to get your tires back into some sort of a rhythm and see how you can play it out. Let's see what the track conditions are like, Andrew. Starting to go down.
We've lost 3 degrees since the green flag. It was at 42 degrees Celsius track temp. Now we're down to 39 C, 26 C on the ambient, so 1 degree down there. So definitely the track temperature is starting to fall, and it's going to keep falling as we get on closer to 4:30 and even towards 5 o'clock.
Still do have, yeah, like you say, almost a full hour left to run, so expect the conditions to hopefully get slightly more favorable in that final stint of the race. Chase Wilson immediately, first lap of asking, past Andrew Marquez out of pit lane. Nice easy move, and now tries to build the margin to Kalisto with a bit of a buffer in front. Not been an easy day for Matt Taylor, has it? And it's going to continue to be a frustrating one. Spins in front of the 46 of Carlos Villa, and then backs it into the gravel, and I'm assuming he's going to have to wait a bit of a while before he can spool it up with the traffic incoming.
Yeah, that's a really tough place to try and get the car going again as well, just because of the blind nature under that Corvette bridge. It's a really steep uphill, and I think it just looks like Matt Taylor, he just had a little bit too much rear brake in it, and it's really easy to do when you come over that hill. The rear sort of unloads strangely when you're on, if you're trailing the brake through there. So I think that's just what happened with Matt Taylor's, just didn't modulate the brakes quite appropriately there.
One thing that Adam Blocker did mention was that moving the brake bias forward helped to manage the rear wear quite a bit. And I guess part of it, this is something that I think we talk about a bit more in American open wheel racing, but maybe, you know, Matt Taylor, fresh out of pit lane, that was his outlap there, was so used to worn tires and what that felt like, hadn't adjusted the brake bias maybe into a place that was more comfortable on fresh tires, and found himself getting caught out.
Yeah, that can absolutely happen, because you do get into sort of a feel for the tires, and it almost takes you a lap, maybe even 2, to get the feel back for the new tires. So even though you intuitively think, oh yeah, I have more grip, I should be faster, I should be able to commit harder, you really don't know quite where the line is because you're so used to the line being that much further back from where you are.
Miguel Vigo ran himself slightly off the track, has given up some ground to the Synergy Motorsports duo that are chasing down from behind, but his counterpart in the GTP, the LMDH, is showing what patience can be like. And Graham Sanders, despite the fact that he's trying to hunt down his teammate John Baderfer, is showing plenty of admirable patience through Bill Mitchell Bend.
I definitely think that now that he's around Phil Krause, Graham Sanders, the urgency is maybe going away just a little bit. I think he knows that he can sort of gain back on his teammate John Baderfer a little bit at will, and it's more just along the lines of being patient, allowing the traffic to play out as it does, because we know that the ebbs and flows of traffic is just something that you have to deal with as a prototype driver here.
Even as a GT driver, right? Because you would prefer to get caught on the straights. You would definitely not enjoy being dived like Miguel Vigo had happen, right? So fortune on
Absolutely.
either side there. Marquez and Kalisto. I've got to hope that they don't lose ground to Wilson in front. Where's the next AM driver? It's Creighton Carter, who's in 10th position, but is then 15 seconds down the road. Trevor Malone third. Remember, Malone's coming off the back of a couple of victories in class, but they've all come outside of the top 10, where, again, because the points for the pros and the AMs split on track, it means that he hasn't eaten into the championship lead as one might expect.
That's exactly right. Unfortunately for Malone, he just wasn't really able to capitalize on Chase Wilson like he potentially could have. And those outside of the top 10 finishes, they're going to come back to haunt him come the end of the season in the championship fight, because it was a real opportunity for Malone these last couple of races, and he just wasn't able to capitalize.
But, I mean, to be fair, Chase Wilson's almost doing a Sean Campbell kind of a season, isn't he?
That is true. Chase Wilson is sort of in a class of his own almost. Because like he isn't quite at the same level as the top of the pro class, but at the same time he's so much better than the rest of the AM drivers race after race that you almost want like a middle class for him.
This is where, right, if you go and look at GT3 racing in the real world, you've got the pros, you've got pro-ams. Wait, how do they... It's pros, pro-ams, and then silver is, I think, for all ams. And then there's a couple more classes interspersed in there for, like, have a driver over a certain age kind of thing. Like, it's almost feels like a participation trophy at times, but it's kind of the way that GT3 racing works, to find a... very much like iRacing with its split systems, right? Is to find a race in effect for everyone inside of the race. Matt Taylor's race has come to an end. That's a lot of saying race in the space of a couple of sentences.
Yeah, and this one, I think this was more of a giving up as the car started to spit out. There wasn't much Matt Taylor could do. He just lost the rear end. I think he'd already cooked the rear tires from the first spin and never really came back, and then he's just a passenger as he goes towards this fence here, and that's pretty serious damage for a fairly low speed impact there.
It is indeed, and front end goes missing. In fact, it doesn't just go missing, it tries to launch itself from the body of the car, and Matt Taylor, I think, is going to become the second retiree in the prototype field, because Flynn Lazier did park it about 7 laps ago. We are nearing the halfway mark of this race. Matthew Morhart not really holding on to Miguel Vigo. It's once again in this effectively first half of the stint. Once you get the first couple of laps on the tires done and dusted, where Vigo seems to be able to eke out a couple of seconds. And to what you were saying slightly earlier, Andrew, Matthew Morhart starts to pick up the pace a little bit later in the run.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at his gap to Sean Campbell, it hasn't really changed too much since the pit stops. Miguel Vigo is lap by lap just eking out a 10th here, a 10th there, and you have to wonder if Campbell's sort of just maintaining the gap at this point, doesn't want to push too hard, just knowing that he does have the 5-second buffer, but he's definitely still the carrot out in front of Miguel Vigo, driving him forward, isn't he?
Yes, he's being dangled just in front, isn't he? And for Vigo, I definitely get the sense that if it's going to be a race of what ifs, because it would have been on pace that Vigo has kept up with the back of the 26, and if not for the moment with traffic, could 66 be just that little bit closer, but there is still a long way in this race to go. Plenty of unpredictable steps potentially still to come. The one thing that is maybe a little bit more predictable in some ways, not necessarily just the fact that the weather continues to tail off in a relatively linear fashion, but the fact that now the traffic is all spread around the track just that little bit more. Let's not forget the white bubbles on the track map indicate the GT3 Pro machines, the yellows the GT3 AMs, and the reds the LMDHs.
And you got to say, Arjuna, the LMDHs are really liking the looks of how spread out things are. Yes, there's a battle here or a battle there, but there aren't the long trains that were getting them in so much trouble earlier on in the race. So definitely a good thing if you're an LMDH driver right now.
Yeah, but as much as plenty of it has gone and stretched out, here is the three that have compressed themselves together once again. Wilson, Marquez, and Callisto. And going back to the talk of GT3 series, right, and how some have Pro, Pro-Am, Silver, etc., etc. Again, just to reiterate, these drivers are in 2 classes, classified in the championship separately, but each position that they take away from one another is points taken away on the board. So for Wilson, expect the stern defense potentially to be offered in the later stages of the race. Would not be surprised, though, with still half the race distance to run. Maybe we see the 13 sit back and just ride for that little bit. When you've been away from a championship for a couple of weeks, Andrew, aren't just getting back into the car sometimes for the first time. You're jumping back and remembering, oh, I remember how that GT3 sometimes behaves when I'm following them in a line and where I need to adjust my braking zones. I know what my traffic's going to do when I see a certain name approaching me into the braking zone of turn number 5.
Yeah, and even further than that, it's just remembering how to defend, how to overtake, and how to operate in a battle situation like this. And it takes a little bit to get used to it again. When you're doing it time after time, week after week, you really get into sort of a mode where it's almost automatic. But if you take a couple of weeks off, it does take a couple of laps and maybe even half a race to get back into that right on the nice edge of control and the nice edge of the battle.
It's that muscle memory that we talk so much about, why the drivers at the top levels of sim racing put so many hours into the preparation. Half the race complete, still half to go here at America's National Park of Speed. Don't go anywhere. On RaceSpotTV, we'll be right back with the run to the checkered flag in the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Road America. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and to America's National Park of Speed. We're live for the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Road America, presented by Gomez Sim Industries, with still half the race left to play out. Hello everyone, my name is Arjuna Kenkipati, delighted to be joined alongside by Andrew Kinsella as we work our way through the back half of the 2023 ButtKicker Sports Car Series campaign. It's still John Bader for that leads at the very front in a Hydra Race Geodesic Racing 1 and 2, but Sean Campbell sees his lead start to come on down in the GT3 class. Andrew, been a relatively quiet day attrition-wise with just 3 retirements so far, still plenty of fighters out there on the track.
Yeah, there's still a lot of racing to be had, Arjuna. We're just under halfway still to go in this race, and there's still a lot of battling on track. A lot of things can still happen, and it's just one mistake away, and all of these results that you see on the screen right now can change. And I think it's more surprising just how close the GT3 field is compared to how far the LMDH field has sort of gapped themselves out.
Absolutely. We've been traditionally a bit more used to the fact that Sean Campbell has just broken away at the front and been able to run barnstormers, but even after Miguel Vigo had the unfortunate moment off the track, by no means has the 66 seen its momentum falter. You're looking top and bottom at first and second positions as they run themselves down the main straight, and on the start of the 8th lap of their run, it means that they probably burned through half of their fuel, or at least getting to that stage in a short handful of laps time. But of course, for these drivers as well, it means that tires, Andrew, going to be starting to get to that point where you are leaning on the rears more than they can offer.
Yeah, this is definitely the point in time where you have to be very, very careful. You can't afford to overdrive the car at this point. You can't slide the tires too much, or else it'll just start going away really, really quickly. So if you're Miguel Vigo, who you're seeing the gap go down lap by lap, 10th by 10th, or 10th by 10th as the laps go by. So you really have to be careful not to push too hard. You just got to take what the car gives you and see where you are after this next pit cycle, I think.
I think you also have to be careful you don't push beyond the bounds of the track just too far. Austin Young's going to battle with Alexander Van der Sant, and it's the 11 up into the 4th position. Van der Sant back up underneath, though, switching that momentum through turn 1, but going to back out down the hill into turn 3. So, of course, the recovery drive for Young, who's not been involved in just one moment, ran wide on the opening corner of the race, then got tussled up in some drama with Adam Blocker. Still has a chance, you'd think, for a solid 4th position.
I was going to say, what happens when you're recovering from your recovery drive for like the 3rd time? There has to be another name. We can't just keep saying recovery over and over again for Young.
I mean, the problem is that he's having to recover so many times, right? It's having to recover once is bad enough. Having to do it twice or thrice in a race with a field as close as this. The 25-second margin, I think, goes to tell enough, given that the top 3 was split by what? 10th and a half in qualifying?
It was a 10th and a half in qualifying, and after about 25 minutes in this race, it was only about 5 seconds on track. So just goes to show you what a little bit of argy-bargy can do to the top of the order. But the driver who hasn't had any argy-bargy is the driver on screen right now, John Batafer. He has had just an immaculate race so far, and he's been slowly eking out that gap on his teammate Graham Sanders.
What do you know? Staying out of trouble. Usually quite good for winning races, winning championships. And championship leader John Batafer definitely seems to be on a bit of a roll right now. We'll be hoping with a couple of weeks off after this that the momentum can be picked back up when we go racing at Silverstone, which is, yes, still old school in its nature, but in a different way to this. Silverstone, of course, has seen its layout modified, unlike Road America, since it's basically settled into this facility. But it feels modern. It feels a little bit sterile in some places, doesn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, well, it's sort of it's an interesting hybrid, isn't it? Where you have the first basically third of the lap, and it feels like a very modern Herman Tilkedrome sort of clone, and then you get back into the old track, and suddenly you're like, oh, this is like an old school raceway, and then of course you just go around the start finish line again, and it's completely different again. So where Red Bull Ring was really modern, this track was very old school. Silverstone is almost both of them in one.
Yep, it is, and it makes for, I think, in some ways a bit of an interesting setup compromise. Not one that these drivers, of course, are going to have to worry too much about. They will have just to get to grips with the fixed setup that they are given. Move to the inside on one of the Synergy Motorsports duo by our race leader, John Batafer, as he continues to slice and dice left and right through the traffic. And the margin back to his teammate just continuing to grow larger and larger. Here is that battle for 7th in the GT3s. Wilson still leading Marquez and Callisto. Thing to remember is in about 3 laps time for these drivers, when we get to the half-hour to go mark of the race, hypothetically you could pit and get to the end, but these drivers have enough fuel to go a little bit longer. One concern will be for Andrew Marquez, the fact that he had a 3-second shorter pit stop in the first cycle of the race.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Marquez did go the 1 lap longer compared to the other 2, so I think that sort of offsets each other there. I think for Marquez, this is where his car is going to come alive in comparison to Chase Wilson, is right up towards the end of this stint where he just has the 1 lap fresher tires, and it could make a difference here. I think he's really starting to put some pressure on Chase Wilson.
You can see the differences in times on that left side. We're not talking big margins by any means, but every little bit of fuel in a track this long can be a big difference maker. And so for Marquez, hopefully, even with the 1 lap longer, not too concerned about the numbers. Big lift of the throttle though down the hill in towards turn number 5. He's putting the pressure on, but not really forcing the issue just yet. In terms of the LMDHs, I did mention earlier, Phil Kraus, yes, is 12 seconds off of the race leader, but we'll expect to hopefully be 5 seconds shorter in the pit stop cycle. Not necessarily expecting that to bring Kraus into touching distance of the leader, as Van der Sant has a big moment through the gravel.
Yeah, that was just a little bit of a miscalculation there from Van der Sant. He's going to come out behind his teammate Adam Blocker. That's going to knock Van der Sant down to the 6th position there. But yeah, it looked like he was just trying to get around some GT3 drivers, misjudged the speed through the carousel there, and just got a little too wide. And as soon as he had even touched that grass, the car snapped on him, and he did a real good job to stay out of the tire barrier there.
Not the first time we've seen an incident like that so far this race, and I have no doubt it will not be the last either. So Van der Sant slips up, teammate Blocker takes advantage. Powerslide Motorsports, of course, in the HyperX Team Championship, still looking to try and regain some ground to Synergy Lavoie and to Graphics LC Chronograph. There's about 50 points across those 3 teams as they run coming into this particular round of the championship. Still Wilson, Marquez, and Kalisto, the closest machines out there on the track. Michael O'Brien sails it up the inside as Alex Guyon comes out of pit lane. And now Marquez the next to run wide.
That was a big mistake for Marquez, and it took him a couple of seconds to gather that back up. Big mistake there for Marquez. He's going to have to get his tires scrubbed clean really quickly here and get back on the back of Kalisto.
I think just got a little bit spooked by the fast arriving Michael O'Brien. Slightly missed the turn in, and then face full of understeer ran wide, and just so much momentum being lost as well. That's the real damage for Marquez, who's not just lost the position, but lost the ground as well, and now has to try and close back up into the drafting range of the 13 and of the 97. After Silverstone, a trip over to Indianapolis, which of course not necessarily associated with endurance racing to many, but that's going to be changing. Of course, we've seen GT3 cars go there and race into the night, something that we're continuing over the next couple of years. And the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship heads to the Brickyard later this year for a 2-hour and 40-minute race, all in preparation, Andrew, for longer endurance races to come in the years to come.
And I'm actually kind of excited about that. I think that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course is really a track that could potentially have some really fun action with all the speed differentials between the different classes. I think that it could set up a really good race there.
I love it. Do love myself a bit of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we did prove that no matter what sort of combos that you put, as long as you have, I think, the appropriate speed deltas between the classes. We did the GT3s and the touring cars last year in the IMSA Esports Global Championship. Definitely find that it's an interesting combination for everyone to be trying to work their way around. Miguel Vigo has lost a bit of ground to Sean Campbell once again. The margin re-established around 5 seconds or so. Matthew Morhart 2 seconds back of Vigo, 2 seconds back to Ryan Otis. It all feels a little bit like the drivers are running on strings right now at their very fastest speed, but it's not quite fast enough to close on those in front.
Yeah, and of course there's the distinct possibility that Sean Campbell is just sort of minding the gap, and then as soon as he saw it ticking under that 4-second mark, he just decided to turn the wick back up and crush all their hopes and dreams. So he does tend to do that in this field more often than not, but it's definitely been a really good race. It hasn't been necessarily that close battling that's happened in the GT3 field, but you can tell that these drivers like if we were to ride on board with Ryan Otis or with any of these drivers, they will be pushing to the maximum every single lap. So from a driver's perspective, this race would be a lot of fun for this top four.
And even when you're saving fuel, like maybe some might be doing, does not mean you can't be pushing to the very limit and making the most of every opportunity. There's David Sirra working on through. A great opportunity for us to talk about our BMW Performance Driving School driver profile for today, and someone that came into the Lionheart Racing Series in the Retro Series a handful of years ago, expected to be a bit of a road course ringer. It's not necessarily been that way. The top five's not accurate there, but the top 10's 5th in the all-time ranking. 9 pole positions, many of those coming on ovals. David Sirra has been a delight to have as part of the series and as part of the community, Andrew, since he's joined us.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been a valued member of the Lionheart community, and as you say, he sort of surprised everyone where some of his strongest runs has been on the ovals, and we've seen that a number of times where you expose a road course driver to those ovals, and sometimes they just take to it like no other, and David Sirra is just one of those drivers to do that as he works his way around Sean Campbell there. And yeah, he's just been a really welcome addition, and he's also a welcome addition off the track as well, very active in the Lionheart Discord as well.
Always very passionate when we get the chance to talk to him as well. Here comes the next cycle of the pit stops. It's going to be coming into the lane. A couple of GT3s, Malone and Reagan. Graham Sanders as well, blinks from second, so one of the shorter pit stop times. And it's only 14 complete laps. Basically came in at the very first lap where you could take a almost full pit stop and still roll back out there onto track. Going to be fascinating to see where Sanders comes out. There's plenty of clean air to drop into.
And I think that's the key for Sanders, is coming out in some clean air and really allowing this undercut strategy to play out as best he can. We do know that it's definitely been difficult to keep the tires under them for the full stint, so having the shorter stint length here and then having fresh tires, I think, is definitely going to benefit Sanders in the long run.
There go 2 GT3s of Malone and Reagan. It's going to be a 30-second plus stop, it would seem then, for Graham Sanders, and you can see the traffic continuing to cycle on through. It's not necessarily going to be the most ideal. Behind Campbell, behind Sirra, and then a couple more GT3s to work through as well. But now, with the strategy cycle complete, one task for the 100. Go as fast as you can for the next 27 and a bit minutes.
Absolutely, and I think he will be able to use Sirwa maybe as a little bit of a draft as well, so there is that potential. So it could have been better for Sanders where he came out, but it definitely could have been worse as well.
So early stop for Sanders, early stop as well in the GT3s for Matthew Morehart, who's up on the jacks getting the tires thrown onto the number 62 as well. Not the only car to roll down the lane. You see Marquez in the 63, and hiding behind that is your race leader, John Bader, for one lap after the teammate dives on in. As expected, Phil Kraus still rolling out there on the track.
Yeah, Bedford basically had to come down pit lane this time by to cover off his teammate. He didn't want the undercut to become too powerful there, so not very surprising then. Phil Kraus just looking to do something a little bit different. Obviously, he's got about 10 seconds to make up on John Bedford, so he wasn't going to do that doing the same pit strategy, so you might as well go one lap longer.
Oh, as the 67 of Bedford just continues to sit and wait for the service to be complete. One by one, they trickle on through. There comes the 100. Just see how many tire marks there are off the track at various points around to see how much everyone has been pushing. And as they come through that penultimate corner, just look how close to the edge Graham Sanders got. Bedford's going to roll with a pretty quick stop, all things considered. 32.2 seconds. Going to re-establish that margin up towards the front. See what the margin is back to Graham Sanders, but I think all indications are that it might even have grown through the strategy cycle.
Yeah, and this is not going to help Sanders here, as we got a lot of traffic through turn one there as he works his way by David Sirwan now. So, yeah, that was probably not the ideal pit cycle for Graham Sanders. I think it's going to come out at about 8 seconds, so he probably lost maybe 2, almost 3 seconds there.
and their pit lane time almost identical, so it would have come from the traffic and other factors playing their relative parts. Plenty more drivers rolling down onto the lane. You've got Vigo, Otis, and Via. We're going up on the jacks as well, so clearly you can tell that tyres are definitely a bit of a concern for them all. Let's not forget Matthew Morhart has already taken his pit stop, is winding out of the final corner, and these GT3s have a bit of a lengthier run to the limiter line.
Yeah, of course, the LMDHs are all at the far end of pit lane, and then the GT3 field after them. So, as you say, a little bit longer to go there, a little bit longer roll, but it looks like Morhart is going to come out right behind his teammate Otis here. So Otis does get around Morhart through the pit cycle, but Morhart has the fresh tires and more importantly the up to temp tires.
It was a 3-second longer pit stop for Matthew Morhart, who paid the price for punching the hole in the air for the 95. And with Josh Chin not racing today, we should point that out because of the weather making its way to Florida, so battening up the hatches, and we wish Josh, his family, and everyone well for what is to come. But from Ryan Otis's perspective, a podium on the line and points that he can accumulate, while Josh Ching is watching with not much that he can necessarily do. Still have a couple of cars to come on in, though, at the very front of the fields, not just Sean Campbell in the GT3, of course. Phil Kraus, Austin Young, Adam Blocker, prototypes onto their 17th lap of the stint.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see Kraus, Young, and Blocker going as long as they are here. So it looks like it's going to be a very, very short stop for Kraus and Young and Blocker. So that means that 10-15 second gap that Kraus had to Betafor, that might go away a little bit here. I expect Kraus down pit lane this time by. Yeah, he's certainly coming down.
How much of an attack is that from Kraus? Learned from the first entry. A little bit less aggressive, but hopefully just as quick through the phase. So as Kraus trundles down the lane, it is painful at 45 miles an hour. There's John Betafor, effectively the net race leader, working down into Canada corner.
Yeah, so Betafor shouldn't have any problem getting around Kraus here, but it's going to be interesting with Sanders here, because I think that Kraus should have a much shorter stop than Sanders did. So there might even be a potential for Kraus to get back around Sanders before the end of this race.
Especially with the fact that the margin grew slightly, let's not forget, to the 100 in this cycle of the race. Still up on the jacks for Kraus. I don't think even with 20 minutes to go there was any question as to whether there were going to be fresh boots taken onto the car. Now dropping and rolling though. Already through is Betafor. Where's Sanders in the mix? The 100 cycling into the opening corner. Tires up to temperature, as Andrew mentioned before, but now it's got to go on the charge to bring Kraus back into second.
Yeah, and the tough thing for Sanders is if he can't get around Kraus in the next lap, then Kraus's tires are going to be up to temp, and they're going to be fresher at the same time. So this is a real difficult position for Sanders. He might be seeing second place slip through his hands right in front of his very eyes.
Of course, with the cooling track conditions as well, even with the slightly earlier pit stop, Sanders going to be hoping that the tire is not necessarily a consideration, and that there can be a major concerted effort to the very end of this race. Hurrying again through the hurry downs. Can just see how much to the left the 100 was sitting onto the curb, squatting down under the brakes. They dive into the braking zone, working in towards that carousel. They've got some clean air in front of them for the next lap or so, and with Kraus now getting those tires up to temperature, it's going to get increasingly difficult for Sanders to make a move. Has the draft, has the momentum though through the kink.
This is his opportunity. He's got to take advantage of it right now, or else he's never going to get around Phil Kraus. Kraus not as defensive as I thought he was going to be there though, so he's definitely looking is Graham Sanders though.
They're charging on forward. One note that's quite interesting as we cycle through 2023 is the fact that, of course, there are 3 of the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing drivers. And for Team Talent, private label Team Hype, Phil Kraus, and for Powerside Motorsports may be more limited in numbers, but there is still a bit of work going on in collaboration with those two outfits, and the likes of Robert Malechka and Connor Harrington, who don't necessarily race in the series but represent those two teams, spent this past weekend trying to qualify for a winter of endurance racing where we'd expect the likes of Chin, Kraus, Blocker and company to be part of that equation. 20 minutes to go and into turn 5. Kraus has got the tires fired up, has got enough of a margin, you'd think, to hold that second spot into turn 5.
Yeah, I think Kraus has got the tires just about up to temperature here, so it's going to be really, really difficult at this point for Graham Sanders to get around him.
Maybe traffic can play its part?
It's definitely a possibility, and if you're Graham Sanders, you got to be hoping that the traffic does play a part here, but at the same time, Kraus, with the fresh tires and being in front, he's going to have the ability to sort of dictate where the moves happen. So I don't know how much Sanders can do at this point. I really don't.
Well, one bit of traffic negotiated through the carousel. A vicious curb on the outside. You just see how physically it bounces Kraus around. Unfortunately, these machines able to hang on to the downforce even with that level of travel going through the suspension. 6.5 the margin up toward the front. So all things considered, Phil Kraus entered that pit stop window 12 seconds off of the race leader within 6.5. And as they run right now, there is still plenty of them that have opportunities to cycle on through. Sean Campbell has made his trip down to pit lane. They're cycling on past that GT3 leader now, but this is the closest that Sanders has been so far.
A really good run here from Sanders. Does he have enough momentum and enough draft down this straightaway to make a move? He's looking out into turn 1, but Phil Kraus goes nice and deep, cuts across the front of him, and that might just put paid to Sanders' effort unless he gets another opportunity with traffic.
It's going to take a bit more of a committed send than that, but I mean, fair play to Sanders, not over-committing the car, not overly forcing the issue just yet. There are still 18 minutes with which to work and still plenty of time for these drivers to have a bit of a chance to squabble amongst themselves. One of the GTPs that unfortunately will not be doing any more fighting is Alexander van der Sant.
Yeah, and we talked about how treacherous the pit entry can be. Well, Alex looks like he just missed his braking point, hit the brakes too hard, and then went smack dab into that inside wall there.
I'm trying to figure out what part of the car got lost there from up above. It was not pretty, whatever happened there. Van der Sant helping to prove the commentators are sometimes correct, although it's, let's be honest, more infrequent than we would like. Gap opens up as they funnel in towards Canada corner for second. Chase Wilson, of note, has dropped behind Lionel Callisto, although Andrew Marquez has lost some ground in this battle for 7th.
Yeah, Callisto had a really good pit cycle there, and he was able to get out in front of Chase Wilson. And then, as you mentioned, Marquez, he had a really short stint on the second stint, but then he had that one off track that has cost him so much. So now it's all he can do to get back to the back of Chase Wilson, and Wilson, I believe, has 1 lap fresher tires compared to Marquez.
I think it's definitely the case, but with just 17 minutes to play, does Marquez have enough time to close and then actually make a move? It's one thing to catch. It is, as we all know, another thing to actually work on pass. I definitely get the sense that the most excitement that we are in for is going to be up here between Kraus and Sanders and figuring out who comes out in the second position. I think next time at the line, we are probably heading into the final 10 laps of the race. 10 laps here, they're relatively long. We're talking 40-plus miles still to run.
Yeah, nearly 2-minute laps for your GT3s, minute and 47, minute 48 for your LMDHs. So definitely still a lot of ground to cover, a lot of traffic to negotiate, but definitely this is the battle on the track right now as they both stream by Jim Herrick there.
Just a bit scary there. Jim Herrick has run off the track on this lap, and that's why he's a bit slow and feeling maybe a bit skittish in terms of how aggressive going to be with the traffic cycling on pass. Look how they fly through the kink there out of the carousel. Of course, the kink's been a site of some major drama, not just in multi-class action, but even going back almost decades to the likes of Catherine Lake's humongous incident there. We talk so much about levels of commitment, and talk about it because this track is so rewarding when you can leave it all out there and really stick it out. Matthew Morhart, after taking that extra time in the pit lane, has battled back quite nicely. Sits almost within the draft of the teammate Ryan Otis, and now Synergy Motorsports might squabble for the third step on the podium.
Yeah, certainly he's getting sniffs of the draft here and there. If he can just get a little bit closer to Ryan Otis, he's definitely got a chance to get back on the podium here. And what a podium it would be for Morhart, given the speed he's shown all race long and even in the qualifying as well. So there's definitely still a lot to race for between these two drivers, and a lot of pride at stake in the Synergy Motorsport stables.
Ultimately, it speaks very highly of Hydro-Race Geodesic and Synergy Motorsports that they have been able to be so consistent across what's been a pretty unpredictable opening half of the season. I say that with the slight caveat that, of course, Sean Campbell has had a 100% record in pole and victories so far this season. But it's hard enough for one driver to be consistent. We've seen remarkable runs in Lionheart competition before. Adam Blocker in the Open Wheel Series in 2021 when he was finishing inside of the top 5 in every race. Phil Krause stole the championship from Blocker by finishing on the podium in every race that he finished in. Sometimes you just find this form, you find this rich vein of speed. And even on a day like today where maybe Sean Campbell has struggled more than he necessarily has done in any of the other races, Andrew, they find a way to come out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. And having the consistent speed is just, once you achieve it, it's like it almost becomes automatic, and that's where we're at with Sean Campbell. He's just never really under that much duress. No matter how much pressure Miguel Vigo will put him under at certain points in a race, he always has that confidence and that consistent lap. Oh,
Chase Wilson's on pit lane, and so is Lionel Kalisto. I'm going to put 2 and 2 together and assume that something unfortunate has happened. Let's go ahead right now and take a look. The AM class leader running once again in the top 10 on his return to the series. Funnels out of turn 1, and Kalisto runs wide. And you're not going to see what happens. You're just going to see the aftermath.
And Andrew Marquez just about getting that car slowed down in time. So, yeah, it's just one moment can change the course of the race. And the series of unfortunate events for Chase Wilson seems to have continued there. So, yeah, that was a big impact. Just nothing Wilson could do. And unfortunately, it was just one small little mistake from Kalisto.
And Marquez, like you said, great job to recognize the danger, slow it down, and with a sufficient margin behind to Travis Jägerlainer, has grabbed 7th position and been able to break away from those behind. As mentioned, both Kalisto and Wilson taking a flatbed to the pit lane. They will finish 14th and 15th in the combined GT3 field, unless Jimbo Pfeiffer has enough time in these closing 12 minutes to get the couple of laps that he is behind them in his favor and jump in front and grab a couple of extra points. Does that mean that Creighton Carter, now in 9th position, is going to inherit the AM class win? I think it does.
Yeah, Creighton Carter is in a perfect position here, and he's another driver. We haven't talked too much about him, but he's just kept his nose nice and clean all race long, and it's going to pay off for him if he can do it for just another 11 minutes and 30 seconds.
But again, the points being earned up to Wilson. Factor in the drop rounds as well, because these drivers in a 18-round championship do have the liberty of dropping some of their poorer scores or using a drop round in case they need to miss a round for whatever reason. You only have a finite amount of those, though, and so in the AM class, when you are sharing the points with the pros, you need to make sure that you're finishing as high up as possible. And so for Wilson, who was battling up in 7th, that's still more points than Carter's going to get down in 9th. But there are, like we say, still 10 minutes to go. Graham Sanders holding steady with Phil Krause. but not getting the sense that a move is really on offer here. With the championship sitting as close as it is right now, Andrew, you've got to feel for Sanders, who is inside the equation, but the driver the furthest away right now inside of the top 4, there's some pressure to get as many points as possible as the season begins to bring itself to a close.
There is some of that pressure, yes, but you also have to think big picture in a situation like this, and if you just don't have quite the speed to get to Phil Kraus, you cannot afford to throw away a good third-place finish and finish in 8th or 9th position in a race like this. So I think for Sanders, the best thing that he can do is just sit back, see if Phil Kraus makes a mistake at some point and be there to capitalize on it. Otherwise, just accept the 3rd place at this point.
Racing drivers accepting the position that they are in.
I know it'll never happen, but that's what he should be doing.
We'll keep an eye on this, keep an eye as well. 10 minutes to go on the battle for 3rd in the GT3s, where Otis and Morhart, the teammates, still ducking in and out of the draft. Morhart's within 1.5 for the majority of the lap, but he's got to get a couple of tenths closer to really begin to get the benefit of the hole in the air and for things to potentially look to be shifting on. As we mentioned, Silverstone coming up in a couple of weeks' time. These drivers do get a bit of a reprieve before we go racing again on the September the 18th. And then 3 races on October, Indianapolis, the Nürburgring, and then over to Imola. As Phil Kraus tries to get up the inside of some traffic, and now here comes the opportunity.
And I don't want to say anything here, but who's that GT3 driver's team? What's his team?
I believe it was Carlos Villa in the Hydro Race geodesic racing machine. That may have caused a little bit of drama there. Let's pick up what happened up the hill. I think we need to probably look on board with the GTP, the prototype riding behind, to get a better sense of whether there was a squeeze or not. But the footage will tell us more.
It's a tough one, Arjuna. Was Kraus there? Maybe not, but Villa definitely squeezed him as well. It definitely seemed like Villa did not want to be passed there, because Kraus looked out beforehand, and Villa definitely dove for that apex harder than he had to.
The problem is you can't really get the sense because of the elevation, until you look from up above, you don't get the best look. Kraus was never alongside.
That is true.
That was a send from another state. Carlos Villa, I think, maybe this is what I've been trying to say on occasion through the course of the season. There are some of these drivers like Kraus, Villa, Beta for Campbell. They have so much experience of top-level endurance racing, whether it's in private leagues, whether it's in special events, that sometimes the GT3 slam the door shut on a prototype to make a statement. Maybe that was a similar sort of a case there, and maybe just aggressive defense from Villa cost a bit of time for them all, but they get away with it. And as much as Sanders tried to have a look into turn number 5, Kraus on the defense covered the inside.
And the tough thing for Kraus now, Arjuna, is that he really did a number on those rear tires, so he's going to have to find a way to get the tires calmed down while defending from Graham Sanders here. So that tire advantage that he had before now, I think a lot of it has gone away at this point.
It was a 3-lap difference between the two, and 3 laps at Road America. Again, we're talking a good 12 miles of pushing your Michelin rubber as hard as you can through the kink, past the traffic early. That will help the both of them as they once again throw it up in towards Canada corner. Margin up towards the front has only grown slightly. It's not as big as maybe it could have been with the fighting that we're seeing. And John Badefer is going to be wrapping surely out of the final corner and heading up towards the line. And to, I think, make it 5 to go. A big lunge to the inside from Graham Sanders. And as they'll go 3 wide on the exit with traffic, the hybrid spools up. Phil Kraus is still alongside.
They're going to go side by side, wheel to wheel down this front straightaway. This might end in tears in turn 1 here, Arjuna.
Who's going to be braver? Outside for Kraus. Surely not going to give him the opportunity to stick it. But Sanders slides too wide. Overcommits. And Kraus back to second.
What a move from Kraus. Kraus wasn't going to give an inch, and then suddenly he realized that Sanders sent it in too much. Hopped on the brakes, hooked himself underneath Sanders, did the over-under, and somehow Sanders kept his foot in it while he was going through the dirt there. Great driving from both of them.
Yeah, complete contrast to the opening lap where Austin Young lost so much time in momentum. And then the subsequent slowdown penalty as well. Lot more fortune shining its way down on Graham Sanders. These two have definitely put on a bit of a show for us tonight, but worryingly physical at this point, and you've got to hope that the drivers still have a little bit of restraint and aren't going to go gung-ho. Phil Krause knows exactly what it can be to be involved in an incident like we saw with Chase Wilson and Lionel Kalisto. Think back to ISOWC in 2021 where he had a very similar thing happen on the exit of turn number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. You know that you can't let your guard down for a second at a track like this where the off tracks are so treacherous and your fortune can just change in a moment. So definitely neither of these drivers are done. We've got 4.5 minutes left in this race, and I think that they're going to be going at each other for the full 4.5 minutes.
We are still tracking Morhart, Otis, but that gap has stabilized at now 2 full seconds. Otis doing just enough to keep the gap at out of the drafting range. There are some other fights out on track. It involves Michael O'Brien and David Zero. That is for 6th in this LMDH prototype class, and 2 drivers that have definitely been involved in their fair share of drama. That was a big send to the inside of turn 1 by Graham Sanders. Wasn't taking no for an answer and dispatching of the traffic. One thing with the fact that they're all doing having to drive with the same setup is the fact that they can't necessarily have too much difference in braking and dialing in the car to be working the way that they want. These drivers, not just having so much experience with traffic management, Andrew, they have experience with this car in an open setup environment. They know what they want it to drive like. They've got to get their heads around what it really drives like.
Yeah, absolutely. But at this point in the race, it's all down to instinct, and they've developed those instincts over the course of the last 90-ish minutes. So it's all down to just pushing as hard as you can, and look at Krause taking it as much of the track as you possibly can. And this is really what separates the top drivers from the rest is, look at Krause. He goes all the way to the one side of the track on entry, down to the apex, all the way onto the rumble strips, and taking the curve, taking the exit curves. He is using every single inch of this road to keep Graham Sanders behind him.
Yeah, they are definitely hustling. That is without a shadow of a doubt. With 3 minutes to run, 2 laps to go. 2 laps for Graham Sanders to find a way on through. 2 laps for Phil Krause to put up the stone wall, to hold up the defenses, and to hold on to a very valiant second place effort. But it's all coming as John Bader, for the championship leader, just continues to break away. Midpoint of the season, this is one of those important races, surely, Andrew, where we're seeing Bader for only going to be a second win of the campaign, but continuing to be consistently at the very front.
Yeah, this is also one of those races that could potentially be a momentum shifter for Bader. You mentioned this could be his only his second win of the season, but imagine if he gains a little bit more confidence, what he can start doing and potentially running away with this championship in the second half. Likewise, if you're Phil Krause and Graham Sanders going at each other like this, you're going to be hyped up and ready for the next one as well. So definitely a lot to look forward to as we enter the second half of the season.
Boy, does Lionheart have some history going back to Silverstone. Think back to 2021 and the Open Wheel Series final corner there. But going to be interesting with this multi-class effort as well, how things go in the couple of weeks' time. Closing up, down in through that middle sector. Sanders within half a car length, if that. Passing opportunities, well, every corner is a passing opportunity at Road America. But with the hybrid, being able to spool it up. Turn 1, turn 5, and then Canada corner. Those are the 3 primary opportunities. They're running out now for the 100.
And we're quickly running out of time, as you say. It's just the other wrench that gets thrown in here is how do they catch these GT3 cars. So far, Sanders has been able to force his way through, but you just have to think one driver and one GT3 car could potentially change this battle as well.
Up the hill, one final lap here at Road America, and with the traffic in towards turn number 1, is this the opportunity? Can Graham Sanders latch onto the back of Phil Kraus and slingshot into the opening corner, or maybe down into turn 3? If Kraus sees his momentum checked up, both of them slink to the inside, but down the hill, Kraus still holds on.
Oh, Kraus did just enough there to keep Graham Sanders at bay, but look at Sanders get the run coming down this long back straightaway. I think he's going to have a real good shot here in a 5.
You can see Kraus instantly cover the inside, forces the Hydra Race back in gold the long way around, and you get run out of room if you hang yourself out there to dry. Kraus bobbles off the corner, and as Sanders tries to cut underneath, Kraus throws the Bleak Bog under the Corvette bridge, side by side, and in through the hurry downs, long way around for Graham Sanders.
What a defense there by Phil Kraus. Sanders just runs out of space coming down through the hurry downs. But what a move from Sanders, and what a clean defense there from Phil Kraus.
And that was the opportunity, because now the gap has grown up over a second, and there's going to be no move into Canada corner. John Badefer sets off for the very final time.
John Badefer, we've been so focused on Kraus and Sanders that we've neglected Badefer a bit, but it's just been such a beautiful race from Badefer. Strategy was perfect, pace was perfect, just absolutely stunning from Badefer.
Badefer has been staying out of trouble. Every race he has finished so far in the top 10, and that streak will continue. The second win of the season for John Badefer comes in the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Road America, presented by Gomez Sim Industries, and it's going to be a while before the next car sees the checkered flag. A full 10 seconds before Phil Kraus, Graham Sanders, and then Austin Young will see the end of this race. A dramatic fight in the LMDH class, where we know that by no means are things done and dusted. There's still a long way to go in that championship. While we wait for Sean Campbell to come to the line, Creighton Carter will come out on top in the AM class after Chase Wilson's return to the series ended, unfortunately, in pit lane.
Yeah, great drive there from Creighton Carter. Again, just kept his nose clean the entire time, and it really paid off for him today.
Inside of the top 10 as well, a solid performance to also climb up 6th position from where the qualifying effort left at number 71 machine, Sean Campbell. Margin of victory maybe deceives in some regard. It ballooned up to 10 seconds in the closing stages, but maybe the second closest challenge that really Sean Campbell has seen. If Vigo had not been involved in some dramas, could there have been some battles through the strategy? Campbell didn't want one though, and once again the 100% streak continues.
What can you say about Sean Campbell except that he's inevitable at this point, Arjuna? He again just keeps his nose clean no matter what. He just does lap after lap, relentlessly on pace every single lap of every single race, and again, 100%. What more can you say than that?
It's not just 100% in terms of the victories, right, as well. That is one thing in and of itself. It's the fact that you pair that with the pole record as well. And Sean Campbell, like you say, inevitable, and maybe one hand on the keys to the BMW M4 GT4 driving experience at Thermal, California later this year. All the cars have trickled across the line. Let's dive you down through the ButtKicker race results, where 10 seconds at the end, second victory of the season for Badefer. The Hydra Race Geodesic Racing contingent continuing to look strong. Phil Kraus, well, we are unsure how much he will be able to focus his efforts on the championship, but he's going to continue to put up a fight, that is for sure. Graham Sanders third, Austin Young fourth, after the recovery drive ended up in front of Adam Blocker, while Michael O'Brien and David Sear are the final cars on the leading lap. Alex Guyon finishes 2 laps down, and then the graveyard sees the DNFs including Alexander Van der Sat, Matt Taylor, and then Flynn Lazier with the disconnection early in the day. In the GT3, Sean Campbell on top once again, and 10 seconds clear of Miguel Vigo come the very end of the race. Ryan Otis secures the podium in the faster of the 2 Synergy Motorsports cars, but Matthew Morhart just 1.2 off. The strategy didn't necessarily work in his favor. He towed around his teammate for a large part of the race. Carlos Villa 5th, Brian Bennett 6th, and then one lap down for the likes of Marquez, Jägerlainer, and then the AMs, Carter and Malone, while 11th for Reagan, Herrick, Forsyth, who all saw the checkered flag. As did Jimbo Pfeiffer, cycling in front of Lionel Kalisto and Chase Wilson after the two tangled in the closing stages of the race. Dean Moll, Drew White, that is the 18 GT3 machines that saw the green flag. Not all of them, unfortunately, seeing the very end of the race. And so as we get ready to head into HyperX Victory Lane, we dive into our ButtKicker post-race show. And hopefully 3 winners standing by and getting ready to give us some insight. We'll start once again in the stable of the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team, where John Baderfer wins his 2nd race this season. John, seemed like in the first stint we thought we were going to be in for a really fun fight, and then you broke away and deprived us of that.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was fuel setting behind Phil, and I felt like I left a lot on the table in my qualifying lap, so I just saved to get the extra lap and then tried to make a break for it and was able to break the draft and get away.
Talk to us a little bit about the tires as well, because the track temperature started off pretty scorching, and both trips down pit lane, every car was up on the jacks and getting some fresh tires onto their machines.
Yeah, with LMDH on this track, you burn a lot more fuel, so it's pretty easy to take all 4 tires. But the way this setup was built, it felt like you were steering with the rear tires, so you definitely had to replace those at a minimum. So, but it was a fun race, a lot of good interactions with the other class too. So overall, a good race.
It's an interesting run coming up. We've, of course, got Silverstone next, Indianapolis after that, and Imola to follow. None of those tracks necessarily are very similar. How do you approach them from the perspective of someone who shows up with a fixed setup and has to adapt to the car and the behaviors and tendencies that it has?
Well, I think the old cliche, you take them one at a time, right? So each of them are different, like you said. Some of them I think I'll probably do better at than others, but overall I'll just try and stay consistent, keep the car clean and finish on the podium. That's always the goal.
Well, congratulations on yet another victory and extending the championship lead, John, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time over in Silverstone.
All right, thanks guys.
So the race winner in the LMDHs joins us from HyperX Victory Lane, and now we return to HyperX Victory Lane, but this time with our winner in the GT3. Sean, the margin in qualifying looked a little bit closer than we have become accustomed to. I think you only were able to punch in a lap in the closing stages. What happened in the qualifying session?
Oh, I had to use the bathroom. So I waited like 2 minutes at the start because I had to go use the bathroom.
No track limits playing its part.
Nah.
Oh, well, it did seem like for quite a while at the start the draft was playing its part, and then traffic played its part as well. Talk us through that first 30 minutes of the race.
The first 30 minutes of any race, I guess. But
I think we might have lost Sean Campbell's microphone there. We'll see if we can pick him back up. And Sean, next up heading over to Silverstone. How are you feeling about the way the season's played out so far? Of course, must feel relatively confident, of course, in that championship already. But still, plenty of drama could unfold in the back half of this season.
you can hear me, right?
We get you now, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try and answer the previous question as well. My internet did actually just dip. Perfect timing, right? Next round is I need to go look
Silverstone.
at this. Silverstone. Oh, that's gonna be fun tire wear management. It was kind of similar to this race because it was a lot more on the front tires than I thought it would be. But Silverstone's going to be really bad for the tire wear. It's going to be about who can be the smoothest, and traffic might not actually be that bad because of how wide the track is.
Good point. Yeah, that's the one thing. Silverstone is quite wide. Tires tonight. How bad were they? That was definitely something that we were seeing from some of the other GT3s, is just how much you were pushing. You say it was more on the fronts. The GTP sounded like they were more at the rears. I think we've lost Sean Campbell's internet again, though, so we'll let him...
Are you kidding me?
Oh, no, he's back.
I think it's whenever I click off of TeamSpeak. That's my bad. So I didn't really have rear tire problems with the setup. It was pretty good, but the fronts were burned. I think I had 47% at the first stop on the front left, but it's good that we can take tires now without losing time to fuel.
You say good, I say boring in terms of strategy.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Sean, on the victory. We'll see you in Silverstone in a couple of weeks' time.
Peace.
Sean Campbell victorious. We can chat as well with Miguel Vigo, who was hoping to stay in the draw, but Miguel, traffic was not your friend in those early stages.
Yeah, that was kind of my goal, to try and stay with Sean, and unfortunately I got hip checked there by Alex, and I ended up getting some damage from it. So from then on it was basically kind of just try and do some damage limitation, because I saw that Otis and Mordhart were kind of working together. So I try to keep that gap and just try to underfuel a little bit, so I could just try and stay ahead, and luckily that kind of worked out in my favor.
Yeah, it does seem as though the strategy call in the GT3 can be quite intense in that first stint if you have taken the heavier fuel load and now are feeding the draft to those behind. When you're able to pull a bit of a gap, did you feel like there was that pressure to hold the margin so they couldn't save some fuel behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of them working together there in that first part of the stint, I was kind of worried, because it was really Otis that I was kind of worried about. I thought he was gonna make me jump me. He had the pace to kind of be up there, and once I kind of saw that he messed up a little bit there on the first 2 or 3 laps, I just try to try and go with Sean as quickly as possible before the tires kind of went out.
Well, Miguel, congratulations on the second. Good day for the Hydra Race Geodesic crew as well. Podium in GT3, double podium in the LMDHs. We'll see you guys over at the home of British Motorsports in a couple of weeks' time.
Yep, perfect. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Always great to have a chat with Miguel Vigo. And yes, Silverstone up next for the next level racing Grand Prix of Silverstone. September the 18th, round 12. Andrew, a couple of weeks for the drivers to go away and see what changes iRacing will bring to their cars in just over a week's time.
Yeah, that's the real key here. It isn't just the time away. It's that these cars are definitely going to get updated. So everything that we've learned over the last little while in this season, it all could potentially go out the window, and these drivers could have to learn how to drive these cars all over again, depending on what changes iRacing makes. But Silverstone, we've talked about it. It's going to be a really interesting challenge for these drivers. It's a wide track. Traffic might not come into play as much, but it's that mix of old and new, and the different types of corners that this track offers. It's going to be a real big challenge for these drivers.
It is. You can see here the exit of that new opening stage of the track as well, with the new wing building that the media facility uses. This is the old, you can see on the left, one of the older grandstands, the entry in towards Brooklands and Luffield, the old final couple of corners. Such an interesting contrast. To your point as well, Andrew, as we take a look at the next level racing schedule very quickly, even if there aren't major changes to the cars, let's just highlight the BMW M Hybrid as an example. That prototype class we know is going to get 2 new cars being added to it in this coming build. We might not necessarily see big changes to the way the car itself drives, but there may be changes in the way the balance of performance is built so that all 4 of the cars now in that class can fight on an even playing field, which might just slightly change how these drivers need to get the most out of this machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime when they balance the performance of the cars, that's going to result in some fundamental changes to how the car drives, whether it's power down, whether it is weight distribution, whether it's a whole bunch of different things with the car. So definitely the LMDHs at a minimum are going to change, and I would argue that the GT3s are probably also going to get a little balance of performance shift as well. So everything's still to play for in terms of what's going to happen. We don't know. We haven't seen the release notes yet, but it's going to be interesting when they come out.
All drivers just waiting for that moment where they can figure out what they'll need to be focused on when in just over a week's time we see what these cars will change. That's all, though, in a couple of weeks' time. These drivers get their opportunity to relax, and now as we head off into the closing stages of the 2023 ButtKicker Sports Car Series, so plenty for them left to fight on through. Before we say goodbye, just a reminder that you can head to LionheartRacingSeries.com to learn more about the partners that make all of this possible, or about the 3 competitions that the sanctioning body puts together. Plenty more racing to come in the world as well of the Lionheart Racing Series, so make sure you stick around here on RaceSpotTV and Arena TV to watch all of the action. Of course, still to come before we go racing the next time in this ButtKicker Sports Car Championship. The Lionheart Retro Series will make its way to Barber for the HyperX Grand Prix of Barber this coming Thursday. For the entire team at RaceSpotTV, for Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the other side of the pond, but for now it's John Baderford, Sean Campbell and Creighton Carter on top and America's National Park of Speed.